Hi, welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. I'm Tammy White. I'm the founder of the Bobby White Foundation.
Good morning. I'm Bonni Snyder, your co-host.
Well, as you can see, we're on a little bit of a different set, so this is going to take a little bit getting used to, but I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty cool, too. You know, I feel like I'm on the radio or something. No, I actually like this look. It makes us look, professional. We're always professional.
Yeah.
But I am digging the new look.
Yeah, no, I am too. It's just kind of weird sitting this way and having the mic right there, but no, it's cool. I love it. And it's all thanks to our producer, John, here at Area 52 Media Group. We want to thank them, of course, because otherwise we wouldn't even be here.
That is true.
You know?
That is true.
And also, we cannot forget one of our sponsors, DeLynn Gaston with the mortgage firm. If you are a new home buyer, refinance, I mean, anything, any kind of help, and just even have questions, not sure what to do, or need to help get your credit squared away. I mean, she can guide you like you would not believe.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, the business is the mortgage firm, but it's more than just mortgage.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more than just mortgage.
Yeah, they actually helped with my, not refinance, we went from big bank to something little, and they helped us out with that, and it was just smooth as could be. So that was really cool. So we want to thank them also. What do we got coming up? Oh, Art for Hope is in September, so we're working on that. We've had a couple volunteer meetings. We're going to do things a little bit different this year. Usually we have an auction, and silent auction. I think this year we're going to do away with the auctions, and we're going to have fixed price artwork. Of course, we're still going to have local artists. We do have a signature door that our nieces did that'll be available at the event. We'll have gift baskets, and so we're looking for sponsors for that too. Along with, DeLynn doesn't have to be our only sponsor here too, and Area 52 Media Group. You can sponsor us.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've talked about this, for the last, we've been doing this for 2 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Oh my gosh, it's hard to believe that it's 2.5 years. I think. I thought I've lost track.
There's the door. There's my nieces. They're a little bit bigger. That picture's a couple of years old. Actually, Haley's going to be 16, going to be driving this year. She's already has her driving permit. She's going to be 16 this summer.
I've seen that door up close and personal.
Yeah, the door is really cool. I don't know. They're really, really busy with softball, so I don't know if we'll get a second door for this year or not. But this one's available. I think it's an antique Chevy. I think it's a Chevy truck door, and the window actually rolls up and down. So it is pretty cool that they did all that.
So it's an operational door without the operational truck.
Right, yeah. So you don't need the truck.
As long as you have the door.
Yeah, you have the door and the window rolls up and down. Yeah. So that is pretty cool. So I'm hoping they'll be able to do another one, but we need to get this one a nice home.
So I think for me when I looking at the door and you're right, it is your one of your signature pieces. I would say remind the folks on why a door and the significance of why they picked the Beatles
song. Well, the door. Actually, the door started with my nephew. I think our first Art for Hope, Haley, my older niece, she was the first. She did it first. The first 2 doors that we had. This is the third one, and they're into upcycling, furniture and stuff. And so I think my nephew came up with the door thing, but it's actually all 3 doors have Beatles song lyrics, because that was basically Bobby's favorite. Even when we had his celebration of life at home, they were playing Beatles music throughout the outside in the yard. Even my sister-in-law put together one of those photo montages, and there's a lot of Beatles music in there too. So, and most of the songs have a significance between Bobby and my nephew. So that's what it's.
So what's the significance of Let It Be, this tour?
You know, I just think it is just the. I know what I want to say. I just don't know if I can get it out in words. It's just kind of like, you know, it is what it is. You know, we can't change what happened. We can't. We have to learn to embrace.
You know, I think, you know, I'm a Beatles fan. I love their music. You know, even, you know, when they went off and did, you know, the solo stuff as well. But I think for me, when I think of that song, Let It Be, you know, and I'm going to piggyback on, you know, what you were saying in terms of, you know, the lyrics. It's, you know, sometimes you go in and you listen to a song and, you know, you're just enjoying the music, but you're not really, you don't really process the lyrics. And then, you know, over time you hear the song again and it's like, you're like not really processing the lyrics. But then you have an event happen in your life, or, you know, something like, you know, a loss. And I'm going to, you know, I know I'm going to butcher the lyrics, you know, here a little bit, you know, but it's like one of the first lines is, you know, what is it? When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary, you know, speaks to me or something to me.
Right. Speaking
Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And I'm like, you know, the significance of that, or the impact of that is, again, I'm, you know, repeat what you said. It's like, you know what, sometimes we encounter things that we have no control over, or, you know, we don't always process that it's stuff that we have no control over, but by golly, we want to control, you know, everything about it. And, you know, that, you know, those are, I agree, are very significant words of wisdom. You know, let it, like it is what it is, let it be. Just, you know, allow, yeah, I think what we say in my line of work, allow the process.
Right.
You know, just allow it to happen. You know, be in the, you know, it's very gestalt, be in the moment, you know, stay in, you know, don't, you know, try to get yourself wrapped up in, you know, like what's the phrase that they use, you know, devil in the details, you know, kind of thing. And I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in all the details and the minutia of what's going on. And it's like, wait a minute, just tap, you know, I use the phrase a lot, tap the brakes.
Right. Yeah.
Tap the brakes and, you know, let the process happen. Let yourself, you know, let it be, let it go. I don't say, and, you know, it's like, let it go. What do you mean, let it go? I don't mean it in terms of Frozen, let it go, you know, just throw it aside, you know, but it's like, let it, more so, let me think of Tony Braxton, let it flow. Boy, we are musical today. We are just, I mean, wow, we're just coming all, you know, all kinds of like musical themes. That should be a theme of a show. Let's just, you know, look at music lyrics and how they play into grief.
Hey, that would be a good show.
We may just try that.
And actually, this past week I've been listening to, I came across a podcast with Mel Robbins. And it was, I think the podcast was Let Them. Mm-hmm. Just let them. You can't control things. And her podcast, one of the things that she talked about was her youngest child, her son, was going to prom. Mm-hmm. And there was a bunch of kids, and the girls, you know, had their big flowing gowns, and the guys are in tuxes, and they wanted to go to this really small, hole-in-the-wall, but really great Mexican restaurant where only half of the group could probably even sit. It was pouring rain, mm-hmm. and she was like, "Oh, you can't do that." And then she's like, "What is it going to hurt? Just let them. Mm-hmm. It's their experience." You know, and I think that kind of can play back to us and to those going through grief, let them go through it their way. You know, just because all you're doing, you're causing more angst and anxiety for yourself and towards those people. Just let them.
You know, and I agree with that in terms of, you know, allowing people to do, you know, as they do. And again, this is something else that, you know, I know in the last 2.5 years we've talked about this in terms of, you know, when I think of celebrations of life, and you know, people are like, celebration of life, you know, like, no, it's a funeral. Well, it's a celebration of life. No, but it's a funeral, you know, and, you know, in terms of like, you know, just let it go, let it be, you know, let people do as they do. Doesn't matter what you call it, you know, I can use the term funeral, and, you know, look at it as we are, you know, remembering that person, you know, because it's like, well, you know, because I think I heard some pushback once from somebody who was opposed to the phrase celebration of life. The person's gone. You know, they're gone. They're like, what are you celebrating? You're not celebrating their life. Their life is gone. It's not here anymore. And I was like, you're missing the point. You know, it is celebrating what, you know, the life that they lived,
right? You
know, and it's like, no, but I want to celebrate the life that they would have had. You know, that's going to make me. I'm like, okay, you know what? Tap the brakes. Tap the brakes.
Well, it's, when there it goes. Just if that's how they want to do it, let them.
Right.
You know, I think that, you know, like what we did for Bobby. You know, we just, you know, we had a big party, barbecue, bonfire. You know, and it was only supposed to be like 6 hours, and it ended up being like 13 or 14 hours, you know, into the middle of the night. But it would have been a difficult thing to do if his mother was still alive, you know, because they were devout Catholics. Mm-hmm. I don't know if, and maybe by then, you know, maybe she would have changed her mind about it. I know my mom's ideas had changed over the years. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if I could have got away with that if my mother-in-law was still alive. My mom was here. She came down, and it was really kind of funny because years ago when I lost my first husband, and we did something similar, we had it at a bar that we used to go to, and then a few months later, when I was able to, we scattered his ashes. Probably shouldn't have on the beaches of Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if we were supposed to do that or not, but anyways, and my mom was appalled that I didn't have a funeral for him, and she'd never even met him, and she didn't even like him. But fast forward, you know, 30 years later, and when Bobby dies, she's okay with that. And that's basically, she didn't even do anything for my dad, and she didn't want anything for her either. But that's how she changed over the years. But you have to let people do it how they feel best to do it. It may not be the way that you think it should be done, but just let it be.
You know, I also think like it's regional and it's cultural, and, you know, and when I say regional, you know, again, you know, a lot to do with your upbringing and, you know, what you are accustomed to. You know, so I think back when I was younger, you know, and I would go to, you know, funerals, you know, for people that were passed on. It was in a church 9 times out of 10. It was done in a church. Mm-hmm. There was a minister. Every once in a while, it would be in, in the funeral home. But the process was always the same. It was the night before, for a few hours, there was the wake.
Right.
And then the very next day, you went and you did the service. And, you know, it was, you go in, you know, there was a couple of readings, the minister would say anything, closing prayer, casket got closed, or you did a viewing. When the service itself started, casket was closed and sealed. Very rarely was there like a final viewing. I shouldn't say that. Let me rephrase that. there was usually a final viewing. Very rarely there was not a final, not a final viewing. But then, got sealed, everybody followed the hearse to the graveyard, and
Right.
that's what I grew up in. When I married, my children's dad, they are from Arkansas. And I remember when my father-in-law, passed, it was, we went to the church, did the service and everything else like that. But we went to, what did I say it was? I think it was a graveyard. But I just remember, all right, so where I grew up, I grew up in New Jersey, all right, so I'm used to graveyard. There's a tent over the grave site, and the artificial grass and, the tethers to hold this casket, that lowers the casket down. So my father-in-law, there's no tent. I'm looking at this hole dug in the ground, the dirt piled up, no tent, again, and the casket's just sitting on this mound of dirt. And, everybody's standing around, and their jackets are undone, ties are off, shirts are unbuttoned and everything. And they're passing around a bottle of, I don't know, moonshine or whatnot. And, as I'm looking at this, I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And they had taken, like, ropes, and I'm watching them lower the casket down on the vault and everything, and everybody's taking turns, throwing dirt, shoveling the dirt into the grave. And, of course, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, I've never seen, the casket, like the people.
Right.
Wait a minute, family members are burying? Like, that's crazy. Never seen anything like that. But then I remember with, fast forward to my uncle, similar, we're all standing there, and it's like, my uncle, it was tequila, vodka, or something, like whatever his favorite drink is. But everybody, we had plastic shot glasses. Those who drank, shot of the vodka or whatnot. And hey, Uncle Ed, this is to you. Threw the shot glasses down, into the grave. Threw the bottle of liquor down in. I just remember hearing this bottle hit the casket, and I'm like, this is really strange. To everybody's in black, to, all right, now I'm in Kansas, and, second marriage, family member passed away, people are coming in and jeans and flip-flops and cut-off, like shorts and whatnot, and I'm like, they're not dressed up? Like, they're not in black? Like, what's going on here? And, so, to that point of how things have changed over time to no longer is it a church service, with this rigid set of rules. It is, hey, you know what? Let's have a barbecue. Hey, let's have this. I know for me, and again, I know I've said this before, it was hard for me to plan Patrick's service. And I remember after it was all, said and done, a couple of people walked up to me afterwards, just like, oh my God, I've never been to a service like that before. That was, just an amazing service. And I'm looking, I was like, yeah, and I'm in my head, and I think I vocalized it. Yeah, I planned it. I said, I decided the order of things. And I think the thing that they remembered the most was what Carl's speech to his brother. And because he starts it with, and I know there's a name for it, I can't think of it. I know John knows the name to this. It's that code when you're doing gaming, left, right, up, down. There's a name for it, those particular codes. And, of course, we're all looking, and I'm like, what is my son, what is Carl talking about?
What's he saying?
And, after he finished, with his code, he just said, those of you all who are gamers in the room will recognize, what I just said. And it was a cheat code for one of the games. And, He was like, because Patrick was a gamer, and he was like, yeah. And so he was like, yeah, it's a cheat game. It's a cheat code for one of the games, and he talked about how, this rivalry that he and his brother had, on the game systems. Like Patrick cheated. Patrick would cheat sometimes. And I'm sitting there, and, of course, I'm, on one hand, I'm trying to, it's like, is it wrong to laugh, and chuckle? But at the same time, I'm like, no, Patrick would want, I'm hearing him in my ear. He would want us to remember him fondly. He would want us to laugh.
Right.
And so, we're all sitting, at the funeral home with these silver aviator sunglasses on, because those were his signature glasses. So the aviator sunglasses on. I had one of his bathrobes. I got up to talk, and I said, hang on a minute before I began. I put his bathrobe on, and I took out this string cheese, and I, opened up the string cheese, and I ate it, and I was like, straight cheese, that was his phrase, straight cheese. I was like, yeah, every morning Patrick greeted me with, that's what I eat for breakfast. That's string cheese and a banana. I never ate a banana, but I had the string cheese. But yeah, it's fascinating how the rituals, surrounding services have changed, and how it doesn't have to be, this lockstep thing, and it's evidenced by you were saying with your mom. 30 years ago, it had to be like this, or 30 years ago, how dare you do that?
Right.
To now, it's, well, that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. 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 It's well, and remember when we went to see
Dr. Wolford?
Yeah.
Oh.
I've got the other one on my mind, and so I was like, how he said that not, and I don't think it's so much getting away from the, how things were, this rigid, the funeral home, church service, blah blah blah. It's when you have the lack of celebration or the lack of a funeral service, not per se how you do it, but not doing it, because then you don't really grieve. You're missing part of the grieving process.
So and to that, all right. For me, that begs the question: what do you do in terms of respecting the wishes of the person who's no longer with us?
Well, and that's exactly the situation with my mom, because she and she let family members know, she was just going to be cremated. There was to be no service, nothing. She didn't want anybody to see her, no viewing, nothing. And we had to respect her wishes. That's what she wanted. Now, I have one sibling that tried to circumvent that, but there were three of us and a couple other family members that were like, no, you can't do that. This is not what Mom wanted. And for me, it's not that difficult because I've lived so far away and I wasn't there when it happened. But I think, and I don't know how she would have handled it anyway, but my sister who was there, who moved her entire family there to help Mom out after Dad passed away, I think she's having a really harder time, with it. But she was much, much closer to our mom than I was. And I know that my aunt, who is still alive, was the youngest sister of my mom, and the only sister that is still alive. It was hard for Aunt Joyce too, because she wanted to see Mom, but she knew what Mom's wishes were, and she wanted to abide by Mom's wishes.
And I think for me, I should say for me personally, but as I process, what were the final wishes of, the person who's not with us anymore. And what do we do? Because I heard someone say, they're not going to know, they're gone. And I'm like, I ain't going to take a chance of getting haunted for the rest of my life
No
either.
kidding.
Yeah. Do I believe in haunting? I'm going to take the fifth on that one. But anyway, it is, you're right. There is this issue of, how do we respect the wants of the person who had passed on, and then how does that play into how we grieve? I lost, a really good friend last year. Actually, it's been exactly a year now. Lost her to cancer, and somebody, her husband and I were military together. But her kids, called me mom. My kids called her mom. And we were actual mothers to each other's children. But when she passed away, she had stated, she did not, there was a service. I remember, calling, our daughter, Barbie, and I was like, when is the service? Excuse me. What is the service? And they were like, there's not going to be a service. What? And she goes, Mom did not want a funeral. And of course, I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, it was Cheryl, I'm thinking, okay, I can understand why she didn't want a service. But for me, it's like, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. And I was, I was feeling like majorly guilty because when, she'd battled cancer, it's like known her for decades. She initially had breast cancer, survived that, beat that. And then, this pancreatic cancer, I think is what, ended up claiming her. It's like, this one's going to be tough. And, it was deemed to be terminal. And I was, talking to her husband, Ken, and I'm like, I'm going to come out and visit. And, because work and life and things happen. I was like, I'm going to come out. And, so I'm getting, I'm sitting back like, I should have, when you think of that whole work-life balance thing, which, I think it's something to visit, as well. I have a heck of a time with work-life balance because work is, if you look at it in terms of a scale, what's heavier, the heavier is what gets the most attention. So for me, work is way here, life is way up here, so I have a very crappy work-life balance because I devote, 99.9% of my life to work-related stuff. And so it's like, oh, I'll go see her until it's like, the kids are posting, she was gone. Well, crap. I didn't get to see her when she was alive, and there was going to be no service. So how do I process the fact that this person who, was one of my best friends, mom to my children, is now gone? And it's the same thing with when we lost Aiden and getting in that crash along the way. I still, it's hard to believe it's almost 5 years. Still grappling with the fact that, me, Jean, Patrick, excuse me, we did not get the opportunity. He was cremated before we got home. Mm-hmm. And, there's a part of me that's like, I'm not sure whose, decision that was, but I'm sitting back thinking to myself, could you guys have not waited and given us an opportunity to say goodbye? Why did it have to be right then? And I think that's something that, we'll always grapple with. Or, I think of, Patrick's 2 younger children did not come to his service, and I'm like, to be honest with you, I don't even know if they know, if they remember that they have a sibling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a tough situation. Yeah, my mom, her saying was, if you couldn't come see me when I'm alive, you sure in the hell ain't gonna come see me when I'm dead.
See, my mother had that. My mother had that same thing. I remember. My mom and your mom had something in common. My mother's still, alive, mind you. But I remember having this conversation with my mom on that very same thing, where, she, how did my mom say it? She'd given explicit orders to, I think it was my brother, certain people were not allowed to come to her service, when she passes. And I'm like, what?
My mom she took care of it in one full swoop, just not doing it. But like the one sibling that was having an issue, she hadn't even seen my mom or any of our family, the kids, in 6 years. And it's like, okay, she reached out to you, you never reached back, and you haven't seen her in 6 years, and now you want to see her? And it's not happening.
Well, see, and that is the argument, and see, and that's the debate that my mom and I got into in terms of it. And I was like, forgive me for how this is going to come out. But I looked at my mom and I said, that's real petty. That is absolutely petty. And I'm like, I get it, and it's my mom and it's one of my sisters and my mom. And I was like, I understand why, there's this distance between the two of you. And until the two of you decide to resolve it, that distance is always going to become, it's going to be the issue. Mm-hmm. I think for me, as I look at it, and, I'm processing this from, strictly a mental health, grief process, process of emotions kind of thing, to deny somebody the ability, to see someone after they've passed on. It's like, all right, how might that impede their grieving process? And if it is, or in this particular case, your mom's wishes, my Cheryl's wishes, I don't want a service. Or, when my, last mother-in-law, I've been married 3 times. It's like,
That's okay. My neighbor's been married 5.
My aunt was 7, I think. But anyway, when my mother-in-law, when my last mother-in-law, when she passed on, she was, after she was gone, expressed things. She wanted an immediate cremation. She did not want anybody to see her, after she was gone, and we respected that. She had a service. We had, she was, Catholic as well, devout, strong Catholic. But we had a funeral and everything else like that. But none of us saw her after. We all went to go see her like before she left. Mm-hmm. I loved her sense of humor in the hospital when Scott and I got there. And she says, she go, thank you for coming. And I'm like, Mom, where else would we be? And did you guys have any trouble getting time off of work? And we're like, no, they just told them, you're in the hospital. And, it was, we thought at that time, the word that got to us was, you need to get her now, because, she wasn't going to make it out of the hospital. When I got there, I was like, she's sitting up and, she's, you guys didn't have any trouble getting off work. I was like, no, we told them, you were ill, we needed to go. And she goes, you should have just told him it only happens once. And I was like, I'm looking at her like, Mom, But what for me, the takeaway from, her, and that was, several months later, that, she was gone. But the takeaway from her is, I remember after her service and whatnot, we were all in her house. And my oldest brother-in-law, he's not the oldest, but, my brother-in-law, Dennis, who was like, in charge of everything, he had a letter that Mom had written. And, he was the person was in charge of her final affairs and whatnot. But anyway, she was reading this letter that she had wrote. And, I love the fact that, and again, I'm paraphrasing some of the letter, where she talked about, I'm at peace, I'm okay. Now Dennis is a minister. She was like, Dennis and I have talked about this. I'm good with anything. I have taken the last, 6 months or so, give or take, to put all my affairs in order and do this, so that when it was my time to go, I'd be okay. I would leave, I don't say comfortably, it's not the word I want to use, but she then went through, and I think there were 9 children, a total of 9 children, 8 that were living at the time. And she went through and she was like, this child, you get this. And there were like certain mementos in the house that they would get. Like Scott had bought her a pair of crystal candlesticks, candlestick holders. And he was like, she was like, you get these candlestick, I'm giving you back the candlestick holders. I want I treasured them, blah, 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 but they're yours now. But not only she did that, she then went through all of the spouses and significant others. And, for me, I have this porcelain teapot that, I'm like, do I deserve this? And then I have like a pearl necklace. And I was Dennis was handing me the pearl necklace. I'm like, Dennis, I can't take that. Like, no, I wouldn't feel right. And he was like, no, you need to understand. This is what Mom wanted, and it was right there in her instruction. This is, this is what everybody gets. And I'm like, how do you say no to that? But, again, going back to honoring her wishes, and at the same time giving us that opportunity to grieve that she was lost, that she's gone, and reconciling that with this person is gone. There was no service. How do I process? How do I process this? And like I said, I told my mom. I said, "Yeah, Mom, it is about you. What you want." I said, but at the same time, are you really gonna set up a situation to where you're gonna cause a scene at your own funeral? I see my mom going out like that, but
Well, and like with my mom's wishes, it wasn't done because of this one sister. It was just a blanket thing for everybody. If you're not going to come see me when I'm alive, come on. And that's just the way it was. And you gotta go with that. And with Bobby, I mean, we did what we wanted to do, but we did this is what Bobby wanted.
Yeah.
And it was perfect for him. If you knew him, it was the perfect thing. A formal funeral would not have. It wouldn't have felt right.
Right. My mom's twin sister, her thing is, she was like, I want to be cremated. And we're like, okay. And, we're like, not so much the why, but her rationale was, I don't want you spending, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10,000 for something you're going to bury in the ground. Like, take that money and, go on a trip with it.
Right.
But she was like, yes, we can have a, do, funeral, celebration, whatever you want to call it. She goes, but I'm to be cremated, and that extra money, you use it for something else. Yeah.
I mean, I want to go back to when you mentioned if you don't abide by that person's wishes, whether or not they're going to haunt you or not. That kind of goes into our chapter that we're going back to a chapter in the book that we hadn't looked at this book for a while, but it's chapter 14 in Finding Meaning, the sixth stage of grief with David Kessler. Chapter 14 is Grieving to Believing, the Afterlife. So it's kind of some of this conversation plays into this a bit, and parts of this chapter too goes along with what Dr. Wolfelt talked about, about closure. But I got this, when someone dies, the relationship doesn't die with them. You have to learn how to have a new relationship with them. And with some people, it's a little bit, this chapter could be a little bit controversial depending on your beliefs. But I know that the way you and I believe in the relationship that you have now with Patrick and I have now with Bobby kind of falls along with this.
I found it interesting that this chapter started with, and I'm looking at, the two quotes, Thomas Edison's last words was, "It's very beautiful over there." And Steve Jobs' last words were, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And, as I'm looking at this, I'm like, some very profound words there. You're like, what was the meaning in those words? And, I know those, of us who believe in the afterlife, that there is a life after this one, would be like, they were seeing what was in store for them when they were no longer physically here.
It's like, and I've seen it too. It's like this transition period that some people go through, and some people believe it and some people don't. But we actually saw it it's been years ago. Bobby's Uncle Bobby, he was in the VA assisted living over there off Aaron Cutoff, and we were just down in Boca for a funeral, and we were on our way back, and we got the phone call. We need to get to the VA. So we stopped there on our way home and saw Uncle Bobby, and so we were talking to him, and we're like, okay, we're gonna come back and see you tomorrow. And he's like, oh no, you don't need to do that. I have a really busy day tomorrow. And he passed away that day. Next day. It was like he was preparing for, he knew but he didn't know, and it was like Bobby and I, when we got the phone call, and we're like, do you remember what he said yesterday? He had a really busy day. And that's when he left.
Well, it's, and again, to me, there's a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, I look at, the interpretation in, the meaning, what people are talking about, when, they're taking their last breaths. My grandfather, for example, very religious man, devoutly religious. I was in Germany when he left us. And, as I said, before, I remember, going back to Germany and telling my parents, when I come back, or the next time I come back, it's going to be because he's gone. And it was 10 days later he was gone. But I remember, hearing my mom, talk to me about, his passing, where, he was holding on to my grandmother. And I guess he was squeezing her hand. And, there was like, my grandmother was saying, Lauren, his name was Lauren. He was, Lauren, you're my hand, you're hurting. And he was like, I need to go home. He goes, I need to go home. And they, somebody in the room, I don't remember it was my grandmom or, my mom, or aunt. But anyway, somebody in the room looked at him and says, you are home. And he goes, no, I'm not. And, again, of course, when you look at it from the aspect of someone who is devoutly spiritual, he was basically saying, I'm headed home now. I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys later, as we call it. Another name for, someone's service. It's my homecoming. I'm going to my homecoming. I think of, I wasn't there when, one of my younger sisters passed. Looking back on it now, she was whispering, and my mom. This is my mom and my sister. As she was talking, they asked her, "Who are you talking to?" And she says, "I'm talking to God." And And, it's like, I'm talking to God, and 5 minutes later she was gone. And I was like, wow, so was she really, and of course, people do that. Was she really talking to God? Or did she think she was talking to God? Was she really talking to God, or was that just her faith talking?
Well, and some people say, like, especially people in the medical field, they'll say, oh, well, it's the drugs they're on, or it's the pain from whatever they're going through, that it's not really the spiritual part of it, which they can believe that. I can believe what I want. But like when my father-in-law, he was had hospice care at home, and as it got really closer and closer to him going, he would tell my mother-in-law he would start seeing family members come to visit him that had passed. Mm-hmm. And then it was just days before, after that he passed away. And I mean, I believe it. You can believe what you want. But for me, this helps me in my grieving because, I mean, and Bobby has actually come to me after he passed away. I can't remember if it was the first year or the second year, but he actually, I say physically, but I know it's not physically, but he did. And that's the way I believe. I had gone to psychics, prior to his death, and he didn't believe in it. Like just the week before, I had gone to one, and my dad was kind of coming through, but she was telling me Dad was having a hard time transitioning, and she told me these two people that had been with my dad in the hospital and was going to stay with him as he transitioned. And I had told my mom that, and it upset my mom because he wasn't transitioning easily, and I was like, Mom, he was a pain in the ass on earth. What makes you think he's going to make it easy up there? I said, Aunt Bert and Uncle Don are with him, and I was talking to Bobby about it. It was on a Wednesday, and he took his life on Friday. And I was talking to him about it, and he was rolling his eyes. He's just, whatever, believe whatever. And I'm like, hey, you're going to find out one day. So then when we fast forward like almost a month later, when we have his party, his barbecue, just prior to that, or no, it was after that, because this happened at the event, he came through with somebody that his sister went to high school with. That was a psychic that none of us knew she was. And she called Patty and told Patty about the party, which the only way that anybody would know what happened at this is if you had to be there. And she said that he was really happy with it. He loved all the Beatles music playing. That he was walking through the yard with he was wearing work boots, and he was kneeling down to tie his work boots. Well, when he's in the yard, that's what he would be wearing. That's what he would be doing. Right. And it's just like, that was it. And this is like, see? See? But it goes on here in this chapter. It's like, your relation can continue to evolve. And, I talk to Bobby all the time. You have things that go on at your house with Patrick. And the relationship can still contain and gain meaning, even if they're not here, physically. She says there, I guess he wrote another book. It's called On Grief and Grieving, and the concept of closure, which we've talked about a lot with Dr. Wolfelt. And here I say, you're not closing the door on a relationship with the person who died. You don't ever bring the grief over a loved one to a close. You're opening the door to a different relationship. Remaining connected to your loved one is, in grief, is not an unhealthy grieving.
You know, and I think too, with that is, I find sometimes that people get too attached to the physical relationship and not reconciling, not understanding that just because the physical relationship ended, that is not the end of a relationship. I mean, and I find that true, even if, when I think of, being divorced, for example. All right, so there's no physical relationship there, but, I will always have a relationship, albeit we don't speak to one another. It's like we don't have, there's no communication between us. But I'll always have the relationship with, my first husband. We have children together.
Right.
This is the father of my children. Our relationship as spouses, significant others, even as parents, doesn't really exist in that we're connected. Hey, let me chat you up every once in a while. So I think about there's that loss, but there's always that connection will always be there. In my marriage that we didn't have children together. That physical relationship is not there anymore. There's always going to be those years that we spent together. The same thing when somebody's not physically here on earth. I still look up from time to time and swear that I see Patrick in the kitchen. There are, as I'm watching, Devin grow up, and I'm looking at, how much he favors his dad and his mannerisms. So I like that one thing where this whole thing of closure is, just very, the concept of closure is just, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
I think it was a word that, somebody came up with to, cause people to believe or try to create this illusion that eventually you get over it. You don't get over it.
You don't get over it.
And I agree. I learned that, you don't get over it, per se. You learn how to adapt to...
You learn how to carry it with you.
Well, you get to, you adapt to this new life that you're living, the life that does not contain, where that person that's gone is not here anymore.
Physically.
Huh?
Physically.
Yes. Physically, yeah. That person is not physically here anymore.
Right. He, I don't know why I keep saying she, I'm thinking about his co-author. Though many people find great meaning and consolation in their religious beliefs about the afterlife, if there is no such belief, there will be no comfort in hearing someone talk about it. So, not everybody believes this, and that's okay. That's good, for them. So, you can't push it on. Again, it's, let them be them. You have to. He also, from another book that they wrote, based on interviews with physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, blah, 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 the unique phenomenon encountered by many of the dying that challenge our ability to explain fully, understand the mystery of our final days. And that goes back to, like Uncle Bobby saying he's going to be, sorry, I'm going to be busy tomorrow. You can't come see me.
Or people that have had near-death experiences and come back and it's like, this is what I saw. There is an afterlife because of this.
Yeah.
Again, what was that? I look at it like this. We all choose to believe what we want to believe. Who am I or anyone else to challenge the beliefs of someone else? Shirley's like, Bonnie, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, okay, well, let me put it like this, rational, beliefs and whatnot. Granted, I don't go to the neuroses or anything like that, but anyway, wow.
Okay, well, we didn't get through the end, but we were almost through the end. But first, we want to get up these phone numbers for the suicide lifelines. Remember the new 988 number, which we've almost had that for a year now, is a call or text number. And right after it was released last year, within just a few months, there was a 40% increase in call volume. And I'm sure that has increased since then. So make sure you have these numbers in your phone or have them memorized. I always put them in my phone. I always ask people to put them in their phones when I'm speaking somewhere. And this week, I couldn't settle on one positive quote. So we have 2 positive quotes for today. So the first one, at the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of the summer, we remember them. And I picked that one because after Bobby died, the skies were so damn blue. And walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.
I love that one.
I like that one too. That's why I couldn't go with just one this time. I had to
see how you did. Here's 2. I can't choose.
I couldn't. And actually, I had picked out 4, so I narrowed it down to, I'm like, okay, we can just go with 2. So we had to do the one with the hope too. But yeah, whenever I see these, I mean, there's a certain hue of the blue skies, because Bobby had awesome blue eyes. And so, anyways, again, please remember, there's always hope. Thanks.